And joining us for more on tonight's topic is State Representative Greg Steube. He is currently running for the floor of the Senate. And we wanted to tell you we invited the Economic Development Corporation to be on tonight's show, but they declined, instead sending a statement that reads in part, the overarching goal of the Economic Development Corporation of Sarasota County is to be and assist with business growth throughout the community, from startups to established companies to those who are considering relocating here. The Board of County Commissioners may be revisiting certain policies and practices it has in place for attracting new and assisting local companies. There will be no further comment from the EDC until this matter of the Board of County Commissioners gives further direction on our next steps. So obviously, Representative, there may be a communications problem with the EDC, but let's talk about the bigger picture. There are two schools of thought in terms of economic incentives to the big companies into not only our area, but our state. You know, wouldn't you want to, don't you have to offer something to companies to move in from out of the state to set up shop here and create new jobs?
Well, I think one of the things that you do as a policymaker, and one of the things that we as a state have done over the past several years, is you make Florida an environment that's prosperous for businesses and small businesses. And you do that by lowering the tax base and lowering taxes, and you do that by reducing regulations that are hindering them from being successful, whatever type of business that is, whether it's healthcare or construction. And by doing that, you create an environment that is prosperous for businesses. And we've been able to cut $1 billion in the last 2 years in state taxes. We've cut thousands of regulations in the 6 years that I've been in the House. And I think that goes to show the growth that we've had in the state. The other side of that is, should we give money to businesses to come here?
Right, and on a larger scale, isn't that what Governor Rick Scott is doing, going around the country and trying to get businesses to move to Florida by offering them certain tax advantages?
Yeah, I think the governor's done a great job in his promise when he ran his campaign and got elected to bring jobs to Florida. And one of the things that he wanted last year was the $250 million for the Economic Incentive Fund that they had in the Senate, and the House had $1 billion tax cut. When both budgets went into the conference process, the economic incentive money got lost, and we ended up with $400 million tax cut.
But were you for or against that?
The funding is a different animal than the policy bill. There was a policy bill last year that would change the law that allow your tax dollars to go directly to a private corporation, and I voted against that bill. And similar to the situation that we saw here in Sarasota is why I voted against it. I just don't think that our tax dollars should go directly to private companies, out-of-state companies, to move to Florida to compete with existing companies that we have here. And we saw that with the Sarasota County vote with the roofing company. We have roofing companies here in Sarasota that have been here for years, that took the risk to open a business, and they didn't have our tax dollars, $1 million, to get their company started.
Right, but I believe that company said that what they were actually moving here was their corporate headquarters and people to work there, and not necessarily to take local business away from local roofers. But let's look at some other angles of this. Right now, Sarasota County is negotiating with the Atlanta Braves to build a new spring training facility in the county. That takes money, just like it took to get the Orioles to move here. Are you for or against that?
Well, I mean, it depends on how the deal is structured. If you look at a lot of these stadium, are we going to be building a stadium? Are we, what type of incentives are involved? And if it's a tax incentive or we're cutting their taxes, I've always supported cutting taxes. We've cut billions of taxes since I've been in the House. But if you look at the return on investment on a lot of these projects, the return on the investment is not good. So when you as a legislator are sitting in our position and trying to appropriate dollars that have a good and positive return on investment, we have all these other needs in the state. Those are things that you have to take into account.
But can you really calculate all of that? For instance, right now the Tampa Bay Rays are trying to get a new stadium in Tampa. And a lot of people believe if that does not happen and the Rays leave, that will be a devastating blow to our area. So is it worth, in that case, offering some kind of tax incentives to build a new stadium?
Yeah, a lot of that is a local decision. At the state level, we have a woman named Amy Baker, who's basically the state's economist, and has given us tons of presentations on the return on investment on a lot of these different programs, and it's just not you just don't get the return on the investment for the dollars that you put into the program.
I was telling you earlier, I worked in Hartford when they lost the Hartford Whalers, and I could tell you that it had a devastating economic impact to downtown Hartford, because there is something about a community looking at itself as a major league community, and a lot of businesses went away. But another example of this kind of thing is the film industry. Nancy Dieter was pushing through tax incentives for filmmakers to make movies here in Florida. And one of the things that she pointed out was, recently there was a film that that takes place in Ybor City, but it was shot in Georgia.
Yeah.
And couldn't Florida be benefiting from the money that is spent when these companies come in and produce major motion pictures like that?
I think there's an opportunity to build a tax climate that is prosperous for those type of businesses to come here and shoot those films. Louisiana does a ton of these type of direct money incentives to film companies, which is why a lot of films are shot in Louisiana, and they're now having problems with their budget because they have all this money going out and not enough coming in, and they're trying to budget for Medicaid and the other things that they have. And I think it was a state legislator there that said, well, why don't we at least have a deal where we get some money on the back end? If these movies are successful, then if we're putting the investment out front, we should get something if the movie's successful.
Louisiana has a lot of budgetary problems. Georgia is become almost a little Hollywood, because so much of this business is going to Georgia, and they seem to be doing just fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think on a case-by-case basis, you need to look at the data and what type of return on investment the state's going to get, and then like a decision like the Rays or a stadium or the Braves, how much money is the state or the county going to put in, and what's going to be the return on that investment? And I think that's really important to look at.
Does it make a difference about whether this is a project that may or may not qualify for state tax incentives, or a county like Sarasota County doing what it can unilaterally to try to get companies to move in?
Yeah, again, I'm at the state level, so at the county level, those are things that the commissioners are going to have to decide. This last one with the roofing company, they decided in a 4-1 vote against the incentive for whatever reasons they voted for that. At the state level, we're just basically putting money in a pot that's then appropriated by Enterprise Florida or the governor.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a different calculus at our level, and we're just deciding whether it's a good investment for the state to do it.
Okay, and we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for coming in, Representative.
Absolutely.
And we'll be back in just a moment.